Considering the fact that gaming moves and evolves at a much faster pace than other media, it should come as no surprise that even some of the most successful franchises can get stagnant. Would you be happy if things stayed the same way they are now, forever? Of course not. As a result of this ever-changing landscape, many gaming franchises constantly innovate and reinvent themselves. Some change mechanics, others rewrite the story, while some series even dare to go as far as changing genres. Welcome to HotFix Gaming. I'm Joy. Today, we're looking at 10 such examples of franchises that changed and became more successful after that. So, let's get started. Number 10. Assassin's Creed. You may be wondering, what did Assassin's Creed have to change? After all, upon their launch, they were a success. But in their rush to capitalize on the formula, Ubisoft decided to launch a game each year from 2009 until 2015. And those 7 years of Assassin's Creed proved unsustainable, with its last entry, Syndicate, being the final nail in the coffin. So the change here, while not quite as obvious as other entries in our list, was to break from the annual release schedule and instead focus on delivering a good game straight off the bat, rather than having to fix way too many bugs after launch. The result was Assassin's Creed Origins, a massive open-world action RPG that introduced skill-based swordplay, RPG progression mechanics such as skill trees, and XP-based leveling, as well as a massive variety of gear and weapon types. Do you think Call of Duty should take a page from Ubisoft's book and stop the yearly releases? Let us know in the comment section below. Number 9. Yakuza, or Like a Dragon. Yakuza has been an annualized series since 2014, sometimes even launching 2 games per year. With so many games coming out, making sure that they feel at least a little different with changing protagonists, locations, and time periods is essential. Changing the combat system was one of the more surprising shifts. When the turn-based JRPG combat of Yakuza Like a Dragon was first revealed in a trailer on the 1st of April 2019, many thought it was just an April Fool's joke. But no. Many were later on surprised to find out that the combat system had indeed changed from a brawler to a turn-based, a style of combat that the studio had never done before. It turned out to be great for the franchise, and the series has stuck with that ever since. On top of it, Yakuza Like a Dragon was also the game to pioneer the change in title from Yakuza to Like a Dragon. Number 8. God of War. God of War has been for quite some time one of PlayStation's defining exclusive franchises. For many, this title is a selling point when it comes to deciding which console to buy. This formula that the series had initially started with has proved a success for 8 years, up until 2013's God of War Ascension, which failed to live up to both the expectations and the standards of previous titles. Things had to change, and the change was almost subtle. Instead of mixing things up with big new mechanics, directors and developers took a different approach. They switched to an over-the-shoulder camera view and gave Kratos a son, slowly turning this mass-murdering God of War sympathetic. Number 7. Grand Theft Auto. The first game in the franchise was released in 1997, and it certainly looks the part. Granted, at the time it was quite revolutionary, but today it looks dated with its top-down 2D view. The second game came out 2 years later in 1999, and while it was an improvement, it still had that top-down view. The biggest change in the franchise took place in 2001, when GTA 3 released, moving from that dreaded top-down view to a third-person view. This really provided players with an immersive gameplay experience, and the game received critical acclaim. Nowadays, GTA is one of the most well-known gaming franchises out there. Even some non-gamers know about it. Can you imagine had it not made the jump to third person, though? Number 6. Wolfenstein. Many believe that Wolfenstein 3D was the first game in the series. While it was the first entry by id Software, the debut title of this franchise actually came out in 1981 as Castle Wolfenstein. It's a far cry from id's fast-paced first-person shooter, instead focusing on stealth and showcasing the action from a top-down perspective. If anything, the original game in the series actually resembles Metal Gear more than modern Wolfenstein. However, some more recent titles, such as The New Order and The New Colossus, haven't entirely forgotten their roots, as they feature stealth elements too. If you're enjoying this video so far, be sure to hit that like button as it helps our channel grow. Number 5. The Legend of Zelda. Over the years, Nintendo has tinkered with Zelda's formula, but the biggest change in the franchise came with Breath of the Wild. The 2017 title completely transformed what we knew a Zelda game to be, adding a level of freedom that instantly solidified it as one of the generation's best games. Breath of the Wild had managed to masterfully blend the freedom of the open world with the puzzle-filled dungeons and clever boss fights that we've come to love about the franchise. And Tears of the Kingdom continued on this open-world path as a sequel, just as successful as its predecessor. Number 4. Metroid. Released initially in 1986, Metroid took platforming elements from the Mario franchise and non-linear storytelling from Zelda, ultimately making its players feel that the game's world was much bigger than it actually was. Metroid quickly became a successful franchise, but it wasn't until 2002 when the games finally changed for the better. Unlike previous entries in the franchise, Metroid Prime, released in 2002 for the GameCube, was a primarily first-person experience and involved navigating a three-dimensional environment unimpaired, solving puzzles and defeating enemies along the way. The first in a trilogy, the game changed a great many things, completely reinventing the classic franchise for a new generation. For one thing, the game effectively implemented first-person elements into the franchise, whilst introducing an entire new generation of players to the universe and crafting a genuinely engaging story in the process. It also managed to bridge an 8-year gap in the series, translating the core concept from traditional 2D into a stunningly rendered 3D experience. Number 3. Fallout. Fallout initially started off as an isometric turn-based RPG. Black Isle Studios developed the first 2 games in the series, and there was almost no third entry as they ran into financial difficulties. Luckily, Bethesda bought the rights to the franchise and injected a bit of their Elder Scrolls DNA into it. The results were astonishing. For one thing, the game was no longer turn-based, the perspective also shifting from top-down to a more conventional first-person viewpoint, creating a vastly different experience from Fallout and Fallout 2. Bethesda was able to successfully reinvent the franchise for a whole new generation of players, while also maintaining the series' sense of humor and narrative style, reimagining its core gameplay mechanics. Number 2. Final Fantasy. Final Fantasy is one of the biggest names in gaming. Having first been released to the world in 1987 as a last-ditch effort to save game company Squaresoft, now Square Enix, it earned the final half of its title. Over the years, Square Enix brought many changes in order to improve the franchise, such as more cinematics, bigger and more open worlds, but the biggest change of all was ditching the turn-based combat. Now battle menus are often front and center, and battles rely a little heavier on the player's individual skill than before, a trend that many modern games are going with. Number 1. Resident Evil. The original survival horror masterpiece terrified millions of players upon release. While it still plays well, the 2D backgrounds and the controls are difficult for some to get used to. Resident Evil 4 rectified that situation by being fully 3D and putting the camera behind the player. It was also more fast-paced, but still boasted genuine horror themes. However, the franchise deviated from its horror roots with Resident Evil 5 and 6, focusing more on action, much to the dismay of longtime fans. But in recent years, efforts have been made to bring the franchise back home, with Resident Evil 7 and 8 as well as the remakes. Another change that the franchise has made with Resident Evil 7 and 8 is to switch to first-person point of view, though the third-person view has been kept alive through remakes of older games. What other gaming franchises that have made massive changes do you know of? Let us know your favorite series in the comments section below. And if you want more gaming content, be sure to check out our top 10 games that should get a movie adaptation, as well as our list of top 10 most disturbing video games ever made. Both videos are linked on screen.